Remember me? Yep, I'm back. I've finally managed to get all my work out the way. I've had time to sit down, relax, write some stuff up, and get everything going. So now's a good time for me to catch up with some of my movies by month reviews that I've not been doing. So here are the films I saw in March. So first up, I want to talk about a couple of films that I watched during the Glasgow Film Festival this year. So let's kick off with a French movie called Gagarine. Now Gagarine is a sweet little movie all about the real-life Gagarine housing projects in France, which were kind of big news when they were built and named after the first man in space, Yuri Gagarin, who actually attended the real-life opening of these housing blocks once he got back from space, obviously. Anyway, years after that, having been kind of neglected and left to rack and ruin, it's decided that they're going to pull these tenements down. And again, this is all real life. But here we meet young Yuri, a 16-year-old guy, abandoned by his mum who lives with her boyfriend somewhere else in Paris, leaving him to fend for himself. And he spends his days hanging around with his pal and this local Roma gypsy girl who he kind of fancies, and they fix the place up and try and make it livable. Only it doesn't really work out, and much as in real life, the Gagarin project is still in the process of being demolished, leaving Yuri as one of the few holdouts in these empty tenements. And he starts to kind of lose himself in his astronaut fantasies in this empty building. And this is just a really beautifully shot film, and it's kind of a touching story. Although I have to be honest, it does start out a little bit slow, but once it starts hitting its stride, it really pays off. And everything in it makes all these bits of old buildings and just normal everyday stuff look kind of weird and sort of almost like it's part of a shuttle launch or something from a space age movie. Honestly, it's a 4 out of 5 from me. I mean, I really enjoyed it. It's a simple tale of hope and yearning, people working together. So yeah, check it out whenever it finally comes out somewhere that isn't France or at a film festival. Another film at the Glasgow Film Festival I saw was Our Midnight. And this is a pretty contemplative black and white movie that kind of riffs along the lines of that famous Richard Linklater trilogy, the Before movies, those being Before Sunrise, Before Sunset and Before Midnight, which I really need to check out at some point, but I've never gotten around to seeing them. But as far as I know, they're all about Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy wandering around cities, talking and falling in love, all shot 10 years apart at different points in the same characters' lives. Anyway, Our Midnight does something vaguely similar, where it's about these two characters, Ji-hoon and Eun-young, an out-of-work actor and an office worker, both of whom are suffering from kind of heartache. And Ji-hoon's got a part-time job walking along the bridges of Seoul, trying to talk down suicidal people, and one of the people he meets is Eun-young. And there's an awful lot going on in this film, and it kind of gently explores broken dreams, relationship problems, depression, suicidal ambition, and a lot of other deep stuff. But it's also kind of a sweet film about two people meeting and just opening up to each other. Also, it's really beautifully shot in this kind of stark monochrome square 4:3 vision, which is all the rage at the minute. So yeah, again, another 4 out of 5. I think it's definitely one to check out when it gets a release on this side of the world. Another part of the Glasgow Film Festival is Fright Fest. And one of the films I saw was a horror movie that was part of that. And that was all about exorcism in Mexico. A mexorcism, if you like. Oh, God. Anyway, they skipped that open goal and decided to call the film The Old Ways. And actually, it's really not bad. Basically, it's your standard exorcism kind of movie like The Exorcist or The Exorcism of Emily Rose or any other one of a dozen films about exorcism that are out there. The only difference is that this one's based on Mexican folklore rather than sort of Catholic Church stuff. And it's all about this reporter who was born in this village in Mexico but then moved away to America and grew up and became a journalist in the States and got a bit of a drug problem. Now, sure, the film's clearly making points about drug use and abandoning your heritage and, you know, the strifes of the modern world versus the old natural world and why it's nice, which is pretty much par for the course with folk horror. And it's pretty good fun, and the performances aren't bad. The only letdowns are that, you know, it is a tad on the cheap side, and it does play its hand a little bit early and makes it very plain what's going on in the story rather than drawing out the ambiguity of whether this is a real demon or if it's more of just superstitions and things. And to be honest, there's a few kind of shonky effects in the film at various points that let down some of the subtle work that's done early on. But yep, it's a solid 3 out of 5. Nothing special, but nothing bad either. It's just a solid, half-decent horror movie. Now, as well as films like Our Midnight, South Korea, for all its zaniness with movies like Snowpiercer, Parasite, or things like the Vengeance trilogy and the like, has never actually done a proper space movie, or it hadn't until last year when the film Space Sweepers dropped on Netflix. Now, this is frankly kind of a bit of a bonkers movie, but it's also sort of fun. I mean, imagine if you took aspects of Guardians of the Galaxy, crossed it with the mad humour of The Fifth Element, threw in a big dollop of the space western Serenity, and then topped it all with lashings of that Matt Damon film Elysium, where the super rich live in an orbital space station, and you'd kind of be about halfway to 3/4 of the way towards making Space Sweepers. And the film's all about the not too distant future where Earth is kinda nasty, but there's a paradise-like space station on the moon, and only the super rich can go there. But it's also run by semi-immortal Richard Armitage, who seems to have his own agenda, and we don't know what that is just yet. But in come the Space Sweepers, and they're a crew of ragtag pirate types who literally clear junk and old satellites and stuff from space to stop them smashing into the space station or anything else that's important up there. And they end up happening upon this robot girl who may or may not be a giant bomb. And anyway, it's actually pretty good fun. I mean, it's solid 3.5, leaning towards a 4. The only thing that drags it back to the 3 though is it's nearly 3 hours long. And it kind of drags a bit, and you literally have seen basically every idea in this film done elsewhere before, sometimes better. I mean, it's not bad for a first effort, and hopefully the Korean sci-fi movie industry will kick off big time after this. But yeah, you could do a lot worse than watching Space Sweepers. There's a lot worse things out there than this. Now, interestingly, having just mentioned Elysium, that was the Neil Blomkamp film that had Matt Damon in it, it's kind of fitting that my next movie was actually a film that was an anthology of short films made by that director, and Oat Studios, which is his own personal studio production company. So this film is cleverly titled Oat Studios Volume 1. Now, it's an interesting wee idea with a whole bunch of sci-fi shorts, which all do fun things and presumably are all dry runs at ideas that could be expanded into full feature movies. And some of them are pretty good, like the aliens that get in your brains, and there's another story that's about a Vietnam ghost monster kind of guy who's on fire. What doesn't really work are some of the weird CGI animated stories about a weapon test lab, and a running gag about a cooking channel show which just goes wrong in kind of weird, bizarre and horrible ways, and the guy ends up having to eat hair and things, but most of them are kind of dull and repetitive. I mean, especially the cooking channel stuff. And the best part of the whole film was a short towards the end about Dakota Fanning, who's an android in a biotest facility with an experiment that's gone wrong, and she's being chased around by a giant ball of hands, and our human commander, who's kind of badly hurt. And that was genuinely tense and a lot of fun, but honestly, I'd kind of skip this movie. I mean, it's 2 out of 5 at best, and most of the stories aren't that good, despite having decent cast and decent actors and being fairly well shot. And it's a shame, because Blomkamp made one of the genuinely great movies out there. I mean, he made District 9, which is just fantastic, and everything since then, it's kind of been a series of diminishing returns, and this is just another blip on that downward trajectory. I mean, if you want to watch a bunch of sci-fi shorts, maybe check out Love, Death, Robots. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that all of them are good. So it's a bit up and down, but you've probably got a slightly better chance of finding something fun in that than you will here. But going from one film that had pretty naff animation to one with really good animation, I also watched Fantastic Mr. Fox, which is the adaptation of the Roald Dahl book from the 1980s. Roald Dahl, who also wrote stuff like Matilda, The Witches, James and the Giant Peach, and You Only Live Twice. A lot of these things have been variously adapted over the years, and Fantastic Mr. Fox is a Wes Anderson film. I mean, you might remember me mentioning him directing The Grand Budapest Hotel, which is a brilliant film, and so is this. And it's basically the plot of Dahl's book, which is about a hungry dad fox who wants to look after his family and his friends by sneaking into the farms of a trio of mad farmers and stealing lots of food and cider. But this is all played with a very Wes Anderson-y, difficult family dynamic side of things that isn't in the book at all, with George Clooney as Mr. Fox being very bad at being a good dad but trying hard all the way. And it's definitely one that's good for all the family. I mean, kids are going to really enjoy the silly stuff, while adults are going to get the clever jokes and the story beats that go right over the kids' heads. So yeah, I mean, 4 out of 5, you're going to have a good time with this. I'd be very surprised if you didn't. And it also just has a fantastic cast, and generally, there's very little not to recommend about this movie. And here's something just a little bit different. Although I do dip into foreign films quite a lot, I don't think I've ever actually covered an Indian movie. Certainly not a Bollywood film, although I'm not sure this is technically Bollywood, although it is in a Hindi language. It wasn't made in Bombay, which I think is what makes a distinction. Anyway, it's called Tumbbad, and it's a film all about a guy called Vinayak. And he learns as a wee boy about a weird temple where his grand, like an immortal monster, has to be kept chained up and made to sleep by saying the name of the god Hastar. Anyway, a whole bunch of stuff happens and he ends up chatting to Gran, who's turned into a tree, and tells him how to get unlimited gold from the pit below the temple in exchange for burning her, which is the only way to end her immortal torment. And the film follows Vinayak over the years as he grows up, gets married, and very slowly but surely gives in to more and more greedy temptation, and as he gets older even ropes his own son into the family business of stealing gold from a creepy monster's bell. And this is a really good, bizarre wee horror film. Even if the message of colonialism has ruined India and money is the root of all evil is really, really on the nose throughout the entire thing. But in terms of a compelling story, it's just really interestingly shot, really interestingly made, and the locations are fantastic. And for a film that cost apparently under £1 million to make, which let's face it is pretty much nothing these days, it genuinely is quite impressive. Anyway, I'd give it a solid 4 out of 5. I really enjoyed it. It's on Amazon Prime, and remember to turn the subtitles on, because if you don't, they don't show up, and you know, I don't know about you, but I don't speak very much other than English and bad English. But yeah, Tumbbad. Check it out. And the final movie that I saw in March is one that deserves a bit of an introduction and explanation, and that was Justice League: The Snyder's Cut. And I know a lot of folk know about the Marvel MCU, you know, things like Thor, Iron Man, the Avengers, all that stuff. And they probably know about the DC comic books as well, the DC EU, which is the other load of heroes. So, you know, your Batmans and everything like that. And you probably might remember the film director Zack Snyder, the guy behind 300 and Watchmen, and then he made Man of Steel, which was his grimdark reworking of Superman. Then, following up from that, was Batman v Superman, which pitted the two of them against each other and introduced Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman, and she got her own movie a bit later on. And that's what they called the DCEU. After a while, they tried to do an Avengers-style film called Justice League, which having them all team up against the bad guy. About 95% of the way through principal photography, Zack Snyder and his producer wife Deborah left the production after a family tragedy. So to finish the movie, they called in Joss Whedon, the guy behind stuff like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Firefly, and more recently the first two Avengers movies. And not only did Joss direct the final part of production, he oversaw extensive reshoots of existing scenes, he rewrote massive amounts of the script, slightly changed how it all worked. Basically, the whole thing ended up coming out kinda naff. I mean, it was bad, let's be honest, it was really bad. It was all over the place tonally, it wasn't helped by the schedule conflicts, meaning that Henry Cavill was mid-shoot on Mission Impossible, so when he came back he had a moustache and they had to CGI it out and it looked really bad. And for like 3 or 4 years after the film came out, fans speculated that there was a secret version of this original cut of the film somewhere known as the Snyder Cut. So long story short, turns out there was, because he himself still had all the reels in a vault, and HBO were trying to set up their own streaming service, so they decided they'd lay down the $70 million to let him finish up the special effects, even shoot a couple of unfinished scenes, and release his own version of the original vision of the movie, Justice League: The Snyder Cut. And I saw it. And it's not actually bad. I mean, much like the original, it's still the same basic story. A space demon called Steppenwolf wants to collect 3 mother boxes hidden on Earth, and combine them will make the world end. And so that all the heroes, Batman, Soup, Wonder Woman, Cyborg, Aquaman, and the Flash need to team up to stop him. Simple enough. And the difference is huge, because the original movie was about 1.5 hours to 2 hours long. This film is 4 hours long. It's also shot in square 4:3, but not like when you see in a movie when they would actually zoom in and make it 4:3 in what you used to call pan and scan and square tellies back in the day. This is more like a full frame IMAX movie where you're actually seeing all the stuff that was originally cropped out in the Joss Whedon version. It makes it look slightly different, makes it look more interesting, and it means eventually they will be able to bring it out in IMAX in the cinemas if they want to. But there's more to it than that. I mean, the colour grading's different, the look and feel's the same, all the jokey humour has been taken out, making things more serious and much more keeping with the previous movies. And yeah, it's an enjoyable film. It's leaps and bounds better than the original, but it's still only a 3 out of 5 film, because, to be honest, it was never that good a story to begin with. And although this is a much longer, much more involved one with much better stuff going on and feels less thrown together, it's still not a fantastic film. I mean, you know, there's a lot of plot points that don't make much sense. The ending's a bit naff and cheesy, and a lot of people just don't like the way that it works in terms of the way that Zack Snyder portrays these superheroes. And I don't really care about that. I'm interested just to see different takes on this stuff and different takes on this material. I mean, God knows, we've seen that many different versions of Batman over the year. Trying to square all these different things together in your head. If you can live with all of them, you should be able to live with this different version of things. But ultimately, while it is a different cut, and it's a nice end to that storyline and that part of the universe that he was setting up, it's still only a mediocre film. But at least we got to see what his original vision was. So those were the films I watched in March. I hope you've all enjoyed it, and I hope you haven't been missing me too much. I know it's been a while, and I'll get kicked on with making some other videos as soon as I can. I need to still finish off my Tales from the Loop episode reviews and my Snowpiercer episode reviews. After that, as I said a while back, I'm going to do some one-offs just to basically talk through the TV shows that I've been watching just as a single video for the whole season. But yeah, till I get into those. I can't say when they're going to be. It'll be soon, I hope, but you know, there's still a lot of work kicking about and I have very little free time. But I'll do what I can. Until next time, these have been my grumpy opinions. And a special thanks to all my patrons, and most especially my top tier patrons Judith Coloma, Laurie Laporte, and Michelle Forbes. Thanks guys, everyone keep it real, keep safe, and take care of yourselves. Bye bye.